We'll be discussing Nebraska's loaded quarterback room. What does that mean? What does that mean for Trey Taylor? What does that mean for Dayton Raiola? What does that mean for Marcos Davia, TJ Lateef, eventually down the road? This year, obviously, Dylan, Jalen Gromstad, etc. How do we fix the transfer portal? And the aforementioned member of the national media that I was talking about, the AAC commissioner was talking to, by the way, that guy was John Gruden. I should have just said John Gruden. Enough said. Ron Kellogg, former Nebraska quarterback, will join us at 12:30. We got a couple of clips to play as well, including one clip where they kind of just poke fun at everybody, the 20 most entitled fan bases in America. And, of course, Nebraska's on that list. No shocker there. Let's start right off the top, Jake. Nebraska's potentially. Okay, potentially loaded quarterback rooms. We know, as we sit here, right now, Dylan Raiola expected to be the starter. Then you've got Jalen Gromstad expected to be the number 2. Then it's Marcos Davia, TJ Lateef going into this year. Battling it out, potentially to be number 2, probably 3 and 4. Starting with this year, and then we could get into the projected quarterbacks, the committed quarterbacks next year, and as we go on down the road. But what's your reaction on the quarterback room this year, and how do you think it plays out after Dylan as far as who's 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how it will play out because obviously it's an important role, backup quarterback. I mean, there could be a time or several times, we saw it last year, where Dylan has to go out of the game, and hopefully it's not for a long portion of the game. Sometimes that can be game-winning drives. And I think the most fascinating part about all of this is that Heinrich Harber might be your best backup quarterback on the team. But obviously he's moved on to tight end. And I think just because we know that and we're kind of used to it, it's not as, shocking as if you think about it. I think he could start at a lot of MAC schools. I think there's a couple Big Ten schools he could start. He was 5-3 as a starter at Nebraska. He's got 3 Big Ten wins under his belt. So I think that adds to all of the, when you talk about a loaded room, the potential for that to be loaded more, and for what that means for Heinrich Harburg and what they see for him at tight end. Because listen, if I'm saying he could start at MAC schools or maybe potentially Big Ten, there's money out there, obviously, as we know, for quarterbacks right now. So, I find that as a backdrop to this discussion even more interesting. But that battle for number 2 feels open, right? I mean, Gramstad has felt like he's kind of taken hold of that through the spring. He's a guy they believe in, is going to be coaching someday. So, they feel good. And then all the, the other names you mentioned there are more about long-term upside and who can kind of get there and at what rate they do. So, I mean, I'd still think Gramstad probably has, the favoritism there. Lateef feels like a guy that they feel like is part of the future of the program, but then Davia is the guy that they specifically went out there and added. And if you feel like you've got what you need in the stable, then you don't go out and add. So it's fascinating. I'd go Gramstad, but I wouldn't be shocked by any of them being the number 2 quarterback.
When you look at this year specifically, that's an interesting point you make about Heinrich Harburg. I mean, he may, and that's not a shot at anybody else in the room, okay? Whoever ends up being the backup quarterback, it's more of a compliment to Heinrich Harburg. He may be the best backup quarterback we have because he could probably start at some other schools. And as you mentioned, not just MAC schools, but Big Ten schools. A guy with a winning record in the Big Ten as a quarterback, I might add. Do you think they do some Wildcat with him? Because I advocated for it through the gills last year. And then when Dana became the OC, they finally did some of it. Part of that was Dylan was a true freshman. Less on his plate. Give the offense more things they can do without putting more on Dylan's plate and stress the defense more different ways. I still think it's a good idea. Yes, we expect more out of Dylan this year, but you've got a unique weapon. A bit of a freak athlete when you combine speed, size, strength, physicality, how he plays, what he can do in Heinrich Harburg. I try to utilize him as much as possible. I would still have him short yardage, goal line, red zone type situations, that Wildcat quarterback that can also throw the ball, so to speak. I probably wouldn't do it as much this year as I would have advocated for it last year because Dylan should have that natural progression. I would personally do it. Do you think they will do it?
I think they had last year. They seemed to have, it was like one play a game where you utilize the fact that he's a former quarterback on the field, whether it be pass back, back and forth. They did that a little bit, but it was almost like when he came out there, it was a tell, or at least it was something to be on guard about if you're the defense. That's what I'm excited about this year, is if he develops into more of the every down tight end, then you don't have a tell. Then you're not like, okay, he's on the field, look out for something gimmicky here. Then the gimmick can come out of nowhere, and that's when it's more surprising, and that's when it can be more effective. So that's what I do think that they'll do it, and I think it will be more effective because the defense won't see it coming as much once Harber's on the field, because he should be out there more.
Dude, that's a phenomenal point. Anytime he was out there, I was like, oh, watch the trick play. And probably over half the time, it was something to that ilk. So that's a phenomenal point. Dillon, projected starter. I'd love if they used Harber situationally. Again, move him all over the freaking place like a chess piece. It seems like Jalen Gromstad's probably going to be the number 2. All right, this is the guy who was the player of the year in NAIA, a guy who's going to be a coach in the future. Dillon literally recruited him to come back last December, to come back to Nebraska to be on this squad. Now, maybe it's TJ, maybe it's Marcos, maybe somebody else in that room steps up. I'm always open for wonderful surprises like that. When you start to project next year, and especially into 2027, you got Dayton Raiola coming in. Jalen's going to be gone. Gromstad. Then you've got Trey Taylor coming in. Okay? So 2 years from now, when Trey comes in, you could potentially have Dillon, who would be a senior at that point. And yes, there's all sorts of crazy things that can happen. Let's just roll with this scenario. You got Dillon's a senior at that point. You've got Dayton. If nobody transfers, Marcos, Davia, you've got TJ Lateef, and then you got Trey Taylor. Now, the odds are one of those quarterbacks at least won't be here for whatever reason, whether it's whatever the case may be. So let's say one of them they're all here. Let's say one of them is gone. But how do you look at that room in a couple of years, and how do you foresee not how it's going to play out, because that's too far down the road. How about this? I'm going to answer my own question without asking it, and then you can take it from there. I foresee competition. Something that I grew up having ingrained in me. You fought, you scratch, and you clawed for everything. The world is different, but just the way I was raised, okay? If you got hurt, you walked it off, you rubbed some dirt on it. You didn't speak unless spoken to. And you went out and you fought for everything. You competed for everything. I'm not saying there's not competition in today's world, but due to NIL, the transfer portal, it's a little bit more NFL-esque in the essence of you take a guy highly in the draft, you know he's going to play. You pay a guy a bunch of money out of free agency, NIL, the transfer portal in college football, you expect the dude to play. So there's still competition, but it's a little bit different. I think that room's going to be so loaded with so many different people. All right, and eventually at some point, Dillon won't be our quarterback for whatever that reason is. A couple years, few years down the road, it's going to be so loaded with talented guys and competition. Like, I just want to see true, straight-up competition as much as we can possibly get it. And that's what I project down the road in our loaded, potentially loaded Nebraska quarterback room. What say you, Jake?
Oh, I love the whole thought behind it. And it's been a challenge for Nebraska in the past, man. And I love the plenty of years they had was successful at the quarterback room. But remember, they had young freshman quarterback and Tommy Armstrong will be on the show later today on the captain. And of course, Taylor Martinez before him. And it was hard because you could see, oh, that's your quarterback for the next 3 years. So, you know, it was just became difficult to get backup quarterbacks in there. And then obviously in the Frost era, that was kind of a challenge that nobody would really step up to Adrian Martinez. I guess there was a guy named Joe Burrow they could have took, but I don't know. I can't remember what happened at the end there.
All right, Jake's back. Daggers are back. Daggers are back. Go ahead, Jake.
But that would have been for competition's sake, right? And I think this staff has done a good job of, you know, because it isn't a secret, and especially in today's world, like quarterback position was like the transfer portal position before the transfer portal. I mean, this was, I mean, because if you didn't, like I was, for all those reasons I was pointing out there, if you could tell for the next 3 years, for the next 2 years, it's going to be this guy, it's hard to get somebody in that is of a high ilk. And I think that they've just done a good job of getting guys that have potential, maybe aren't ready to strike, right? And I don't know if, you know, how many of these guys would win, like I was saying with Harber, how many of these guys would win Big Ten jumps? Probably not. But you've got the competition there, and that's what kind of makes it interesting. Who steps up throughout that and positions themselves throughout practice? It'll be interesting because I saw Davia. We saw at least very small amounts of Davia, obviously, in the spring game. Same thing with Latif.
Did you say spring game?
Yeah, it was the spring game.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Or whatever was it called? Husker games?
The Husker games with the scrimmage. Go ahead. Yeah,
but so, and again, I just watching that, and it's that was what it was, right? So it wasn't quite, it didn't feel like maybe those guys are quite ready, and that's why I still think Gramstead might take it. But that's the key. That's the key is whether red shirt freshman or true freshman, once you get it, you can really turn it on. So once it clicks with some of these guys, that's when that competitive element will really step up.
Yeah, it's exciting for the future, for the present of the quarterback room, for the future of the quarterback room down the road. Again, Dylan's expected to be here and play a lot of games for a while. There's going to come a day when he's not there and you need someone to step up, and that's when we got a loaded quarterback room, but potentially what we're expecting and competition. And so you made a good point. You made several, but one that stood out to me was kudos to guys like TJ Latif, Marcos Tavia for coming in when they know Dylan's planned to be the starter for a while. And they're going to come in and they're going to develop, they're going to grow, they're going to get better. Okay. And then you got other guys who are going to come in and they're going to anticipate playing because they're a competitor and that's their mindset. And so hopefully, you don't see a million guys hit the portal. I do think we might as well talk about the portal next and how to fix it. I do think you're going to see more parameters. It's going to be less the Wild Wild West. It'll be the Wild West, and then it'll just be college football. Hopefully there'll be no Wild West at all at that point, at least within reason. All right. And so you don't see guys hitting the portal all the time, coming and going, and contracts coming into place. And, maybe you can only hit the portal X amount of times as opposed to infinity amount of times. And so there should be limits on that. And then when a guy commits, you can be invested in that young player because he's going to be here longer term, which I know some college football fans have been frustrated. Like, why do I even care about National Signing Day? They're going to hit the portal 15 times, potentially. Now you've got a reason all over again. All right. All over again to say, hey, I'm invested in this young man because the odds are he's going to be here.